Welcome to Talk World Radio, a half-hour discussion of politics as if the people mattered. I'm David Swanson. This week on Talk World Radio, we are talking about working to stop weapons shipments, in particular to Israel, and in particular from Canada. Maybe the other way, too. Our guest, Rachel Small, is the Canada organizer for World Beyond War, where I'm the executive director. Rachel, welcome back to Talk World Radio.
Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for all the wonderful work that's going on in Canada. Some countries, as you know, have seemed to have stopped sending weapons to Israel or never did, and some are just happy to keep them flowing by the shipload. Canada, you've made huge progress, but not quite there. So it's interesting. How do you do this case? What's been going on with weapons shipments from Canada?
Yeah, I think Canada's kind of squarely in the middle of that spectrum. I mean, we have made huge progress because where Canada was at 2, 3 years ago, it would be utterly unthinkable where we've pushed the country to. Canada was like, Israel's our biggest ally. We as a NATO country are like, it would be unthinkable that Canada would consider stopping sending weapons to Israel. Instead, after many months of organizing, really across like many tens of thousands of people across Canada in various community groups and national orgs, a lot of us have come together under the Arms Embargo Now campaign, which we kind of co-founded just over a year ago to create this kind of unified effort to really push Canada to end its arms trade with Israel. And through a lot of that organizing, where we're at a really interesting place with the Canadian government now, where we have backed them into a corner where they agree that the right thing to do is for Canada to not be arming Israel. And they, in fact, are repeatedly saying in various ways, no, Canada's not sending weapons to Israel. So that's huge progress. It's like a almost unthinkable narrative switch. The unfortunate part is they haven't actually cut off all the weapons to Israel. They have done some things. They've paused issuing any new weapons export permits, which had first of all, huge backlash in Israel itself and with the Israeli government. Like that was a very unwelcome move from Israel and those who think Canada should be arming it. But they've just been kind of sneaky. There's been a lot of, oh, well, we paused permits, no new permits are getting approved. And then they conveniently don't mention, oh, but there were hundreds of permits that were already approved. Or lately, the lie has been kind of like, oh, well, we're only sending things over that can't be used in Gaza with absolutely no explanation of how they could possibly know where any weapon they send to Israel is being used. Like, are we meant to take Israel's like war criminal government at their word about where these weapons are being used? Like, but they've kind of gone through these maneuvers to try to make it seem like Canada has stopped arming Israel when it hasn't. Luckily, nobody at this point, I think, is really fooled. Some people probably are fooled, but we've made huge strides towards showing people the truth. And I think a really big step towards that was this big report that we put out at the end of July, which was really geared towards like, how do we actually bear the truth about Canada's ongoing shipments to Israel?
And this was a report that made big news and that was basically saying that the government of Canada was lying. And here was evidence of weapons shipments going on despite their denial that such things were happening, right?
Yeah, that's right. We traced hundreds of weapons shipments from Canada to Israel, and a lot of the credit for that data work and for that research and digging goes to the Palestinian Youth Movement, who we put out this report together with, and specifically to their Montreal research team, who've just been phenomenal. And so we sort of had two data sources. One is looking at the Israeli tax authority, their own kind of import data. Basically, every country on earth has various ways that they track their exports and imports. This is totally outside of the military realm. This is just like how many bananas did our country import from which countries over the past year and what was their value, that kind of thing. I think one of the headlines after our report was like, oh, it's always the tax man that gets you. And like in this case, that data set was really this kind of innocuous customs tax data. But turns out there's kind of universal codes for different types of shipments, and they kind of get more and more specific as you get more digits. So the first four digits might be agriculture products, then you add another digit, it's fruit, then you add another few digits, and that's where you get to the bananas. Turns out it's similar for a lot of weapons codes, where you'll get kind of like ammunition, or you'll get kind of like sort of explosive material, and then a few more codes is ammunition, and then eventually you get to the last few digits, and it's, oh, these are bullets. And so through hundreds of hours in spreadsheets tracking down these various codes, we found hundreds of shipments that are for military goods. Some are things like military bullets, and that's all they are. Some are things like aeronautics radar, which admittedly are dual use. There could be some commercial uses for these items, but when we're looking at like tens of millions of dollars of these exports or more from Canada to Israel, some of them are definitely military. So that was kind of one data set, is like really picking apart this Hebrew language database of all of these goods imported to Israel from Canada. And then the other data set was actually accessing commercial shipment records. So if you kind of picture you getting a shipment to your house of, I don't know, something you ordered online, and it shows like, oh, it left this address at this time on a truck. Oh, now it's in processing in X city. Oh, it's set to arrive at your house on X day. It's those kinds of records that showed not just in broad, oh, last year Israel received 500,000 bullets from Canada, but oh, on this date, this shipment left this factory and it's labeled as cartridges, let's say. So we were able to track down 47 of those shipments. It's a snapshot. Like there's hundreds, but even just those 47 was just really compelling data on, oh, look at the types of shipments that left these types of Canadian factories that went straight to Elbit systems in Israel, and most were for Elbit.
So this is good advice to people anywhere in the world, maybe whether their country's government is denying it or not. You can look at shipping companies' records, and you can look at Israel's records, which seems odd given that Israel might have an interest in allowing other countries to get away with their lie that they're not arming Israel, but perhaps not. Perhaps they prefer to shamelessly announce it as acceptable and routine to be arming Israel, or maybe they just uh, haven't had the competence to hide it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this customs data. So a lot of the work in launching this report was, of course, writing the report, pulling out this data, making meaning of it. Like, okay, it left this postal code on this day and then went to Elbit. What's at this postal code? Oh, it's this weapons factory. What type of goods might it be? So like tons of the work was that. But then a lot of the work around launching it was like making this like make sense to Canadian media, especially. And so countless hours walking reporters through the data. So this customs data, for example, it's technically public, and I can walk you through it, going to the Israeli customs website and going through it. But the fact that it's public does not mean it's easy to parse, especially if you don't read Hebrew. So just to say, like the fact that this export and import data is publicly available on the Israeli customs website, it's by no means is advertised. Like you really have to dig, and you really have to pick out what even are these numbers to get to where you see what they are. I think and the vast majority of what's in that database is pretty innocuous stuff. Like it's every type of product that Israel imports, and Israel does not make the vast majority of what it uses. So, I mean, the vast majority is not going to be weapons, but buried in that data, if you have the time and the skills to have a multi-million line Excel spreadsheet and parse through it, there's all kinds of clues.
And some of this was a fun story for people on social media. I think some of these shipments involved weapons on commercial flights down there under your feet with your suitcase, right?
That was truly the part that shocked me the most as someone who, over the past 2 years, has spent countless hours trying to puzzle together, okay, which factories in Canada are making weapons for Israel. I was like pretty familiar with the type of goods Canada was sending to Israel. I was 100% shocked that turns out a lot of these military goods are literally being shipped under passengers' feet on these planes, on all kinds of airlines, including Air Canada, which is kind of like the national airline of Canada. It's a private owned company, but it's kind of Canada's airline. Turns out that F-35 fighter jet parts were literally loaded in the cargo on these planes under people when they were doing like a routine flight from like Toronto to Paris for their holiday. Like truly, I was shocked to see that. And that also kind of implicated a whole bunch of European cities as well. Once we saw these flights, it's like, oh, look, these are going through um, all kinds of cities around the world, and notably a bunch in the EU where there are kind of strict laws about what types of goods can be transited through airports and need to be reported. For example, in Belgium, they just recently had a big court victory. In this case, it's sort of a provincial ruling. It's not done at kind of the national level, but where the major port in Belgium is no longer allowed to be a site where where weapons transit through on their way to Israel. And now our report pulled up, oh, it turns out some are also going through Liège, the airport. That's in a different province. So they have to get a different court ruling, turns out, about the airport. But we've now given them some evidence, hey, the air travel is complicit too. But yeah, people in Canada could not believe it. I think they were the most shocked about these passenger plane transit issue. And the statement the government said in response to reassure people was, oh, don't worry, there's no explosives that are being shipped on Canadian passenger planes, which we just laughed when we saw that. Like, that is a wildly low bar. We, first of all, never said there's explosives on passenger planes. We said there were military goods, there are parts of weapons. But the fact that the best they could come back with is, oh, don't worry, they're not explosive was wild.
I think I didn't suspect this or give it a thought to either, but maybe we should have. I mean, when US President Woodrow Wilson used the German sinking of the ship Lusitania to get the US into World War I, and Germany said, no, no, there are Canadian troops and weapons on that ship. And it was public knowledge. It wasn't any sort of secret, but the whole US government said, no, it's a lie, and maintained it was a lie for decades before someone went and looked at the bottom of the ocean and said, oh yeah, everything they advertised publicly beforehand was totally true. Like, this was, Canadian troops and weapons on a passenger ship, and it was sunk by a military that believed that was okay to kill those people because those weapons were there. So not totally new.
No, but I still think newly shocking. But yes, you're right. It's an old story.
What about public opinion in Canada? Where has that gone? Is it with you, or is it with the government secretly sending the weapons?
Well, there's been recent polling that we had absolutely nothing to do with, but we're very happy to see the results that showed that a majority of people in Canada do support an arms embargo in Israel, do understand that what Israel is doing is a genocide. Like, turns out public opinion is on our side here. And I mean, I think the government has seen the writing on the wall there for a long time, which is why they've been playing this game of saying, oh, of course, Canada is not arming Israel, because they know that's not only the morally correct stance and the legally correct stance, because they're actually breaking the law with these arms exports, but that's also like the popular stance amongst the public.
And so
And I
is
mean,
the
I
government.
don't think that Anand is the Foreign Affairs Minister of Canada, and again, I mentioned just one piece of it, but in generally speaking, her statement that she put out in response to our report, like I don't think it really convinced anyone. The one compelling statement she made in it, which is that Canadian weapons will not or are not fueling this conflict. That's like a nice, strong statement and exactly what we want. It just isn't true. And I don't think she really in any way demonstrated that the government hasn't been lying. So I think they're doing this like bureaucratic spin and sort of communication scrambles to try to avoid definitively cutting off the flow of weapons while still um, making it seem as though they're trying to do,
And
I
so is
guess.
it is it malevolence or is it incompetence? I mean, she doesn't have that George Bush, Ronald Reagan, I'm too much of an idiot to have known I was lying thing going. But it is a complicated
Mhm.
system that's been in place for decades that's hard to shut down. Are they definitely lying?
Well, Anita Anand is an interesting case because she's brand new as the foreign affairs minister and actually had not said anything publicly about the issue of Canadian weapons going to Israel between the last federal election, which was just a few months ago, and when we put out this report. So what we really said over and over again is like the government is at a crossroads here. You actually have a choice. Are you going to keep on with He's like lies and loopholes and spin. Or are you going to actually take definitive action to cut off arms exports? And we were genuinely hopeful that she would take a new path because she had a fresh kind of slate here. She was just starting as foreign affairs minister. She could take a different tack. Unfortunately, she did the exact same thing that the previous foreign affairs minister did, which is kind of talk endlessly about how horrific the situation in Gaza is, how Canada has to do something, and of course Canada can't send weapons to Israel. The only stuff we're sending is stuff that couldn't be used in Gaza. Or lately she was saying, what was the statement she said to media? Oh, it's only stuff that could be used to defend civilians, which is like a whole new level of nonsense. Which civilians, first of all? Presumably not Palestinian civilians. It's kind of just new layers of nonsense spin. I mean, she's the foreign affairs minister. I think that this is not ignorance at this point. This is a decision to move only an inch and not actually fully cut off this flow of arms. Um, where I think it is more just ignorance and confusion is at the level of individual MPs, because we have hundreds of people across the country telling me, I met with my MP and they said that they promised Canada's not arming Israel, and they brought up all these statements from other people. And I think they are genuinely confused and they've been lied to as well, right? If they have Global Affairs Canada, the official body, telling them this thing, then they dutifully pass that on to their representatives. And notably, some of those MPs are MPs who have signed the declaration for an arms embargo, I think are on side, but are like, I'm on side, and look, Canada stopped arming Israel. I think they genuinely have been misled.
But now they need to have the appropriate response to finding out they've been misled, right?
Yeah,
Uh, the
absolutely.
we're speaking with Rachel Small, who's the Canada organizer for World Beyond War. In the US, of course, we have people pushing the same agenda, good activist groups getting virtually nowhere. We do not have the US government saying, honestly or otherwise, we're not sending weapons to Israel. They're happy to blatantly, shamelessly send them. But the fact remains that all of these bills that we're pushing and these amendments we're demanding and so forth are purely redundant. Like there's already a dozen US laws and a handful of international treaties that ban the US from sending these shipments to Israel. Presumably that's the case in Canada too, right? It's not just a public demand, but it's existing law as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Canada has more than the U.S. in terms of also being a signatory to the Arms Trade Treaty, which is extremely clear that you cannot continue sending weapons where there is substantial risk of them being used to commit things like war crimes or violations of international humanitarian law. And the Arms Trade Treaty, one of the best things about it is that it includes that substantial risk. It's not just like, oh, where we have proven that this exact weapon has been used in a war crime, you have to stop sending it. It's really about, yeah, like where a country can reasonably assume that there's a real risk of this happening, you can't send the weapons. And I mean, we are so far past the risk of commission of war crimes. Like, I don't think there, to my knowledge, has ever been a conflict where so much of the war crimes have been like live streamed to millions of people around the world. I just, um, I think we're so far beyond the level of risk that it's just obscene for us to act like we haven't passed that threshold. And I mean, even being party to the Genocide Convention, like I think there are many elements of both international law, and then those are also harmonized within Canadian law, yeah, then make this arms trade illegal. And we work with our a bunch of allied lawyers, and specifically there are folks at Clare, which is suing the Canadian government right now in federal court for not following their own laws about the arms trade in terms of Canada's exports to Israel. So that's a great initiative they are doing. One real issue with Canadian law is that while we have all of these regulations about how we track and restrict and do or don't give permits for weapons exports, which are obviously deeply flawed. But while we have all those, they conveniently apply for every country on earth except the US. There's this like huge exception that has been carved out for any weapons exports from Canada to the US, where they kind of have a blanket permit. They don't actually have to apply for these permits like they do for everywhere else, which means the Canadian government's not even tracking and doesn't report on in any way the movement of these weapons good parts from Canada to the US. This is a huge problem on many different levels, but it's a huge problem when you're tracking the weapons to Israel because Canada's biggest contributions are actually parts of the US war machines that are Israel's primary weapons of war. So if we're looking at what Israel is using to bomb Gazans, it's overwhelmingly US fighter jets. F-35 really notable against them. It's kind of the most advanced one, but there's several. It's things like Apache, Boeing helicopters, um, and many of the drone parts too. So these are parts that are made in Canada, sent to factories in the US that assemble the bigger war machine and then export it to Israel. And Canada is conveniently not counting any of that as a weapon to Israel because it just goes into this black box when it goes to the US. So lots of us have been trying to really tell that part of the story too. Like it's not just these direct shipments from Canada to Tel Aviv, it's also the many billions of dollars of weapons that go from Canada to the US and then on to Israel.
And these officials know well that that's what's happening and that it's a violation of laws and public demands. And so the dishonesty is pretty clear. The Prime Minister of Australia recently was questioned on a similar topic, Australian parts and weapons going to Israel. And he excused some of them as just not that bad, and others with the explanation that, well, Australia is an F-35 nation, as if this were a type of nation where you have a dozen or more nations on earth that have this particular legal status. They're F-35 nations. And so they are obliged to contribute parts to the manufacture of F-35s, regardless of, what the outcome of that is. And so I think just as they build the F-35 in most of the 50 states of the United States in order to build pressure on Congress members to support the stupid thing that doesn't work and, is an instrument of mass murder if it does. I think there's a strategic point to having the bits and pieces of the F-35 made in so many different countries and obliging them to continue that. So this has been an issue in Canada, right? And there is something of a movement around the world in particular to oppose the F-35 and Lockheed Martin in general.
Absolutely. Back to Australia just for one second, though. Just coincidentally, I was just reading this statement that just came out in the Australian media last week from, I have it here in front of me, from former State Department official Josh Paul. So he apparently spent 11 years in charge of overseeing U.S. arms transfers to other states. And he was asked what it would mean if Australia directly sent F-35 parts to Israel for its F-35s. And he answered, and this is a quote, I mean, it is directly the facilitation of war crimes. There's no question about it to my mind. It may be just spare parts, but they're actually in some ways a more vital part of the picture than the bombs themselves. So I think like even amongst the people who have been part of these machinations, like it's becoming increasingly clear that you can't just hide behind the facet of, oh, behind we're part of an F-35 program, as if that excuses you sending over, yeah, the pieces of the warplanes that are
And
being used to decimate Gaza. And we're actually going to be putting out some more information about those Canadian F-35 parts going to Israel in a bit that I can't speak publicly about yet. But I will just say that the more I look into it, the more it's like there's all that kind of the details and the facts and the understanding the different parts. But when you kind of zoom out, we're literally talking about the most advanced warplane on the planet, also most expensive, also most like resource intensive to run, that Israel is using also in never before used ways. Israel's the first country to run the F-35 in beast mode, where they literally attach bombs to the wings. This is the first time it's ever been used. And they're using these weapons to drop 2,000 pound bombs on people in tents. Like just it's just such a grotesque, I don't even want to say imbalance. It's just beyond obscene that like this extra heavy bombing capacity for the F-35 is being pioneered on a population that not only couldn't shoot back, but like has nowhere to be. It makes me so upset that I like can't even talk about it really in a competent way, but it's just disgusting. And I mean, there's lots of documentation about how Israel's use of the F-35 is working as kind of like a laboratory and a testing site for the whole rest of the world, and all the other countries that are buying F-35s are like watching Israel get to test it out and selling it. It's being sold to them based on the way it's battle tested now because of the way Israel is using it. But yeah, in terms of Canada, Canada's in this place where they had committed that, okay, Canada's next fighter jet purchase is going to be F-35s. Really to, I think, no one's big surprise because we knew about the huge intertanglement of Canadian military and the US military. And like, obviously, they wanted the US jet, even though they kind of entertained the possibility of buying European or other jets. Okay, it was going to be the F-35. But then in the past 6 months, in this context of Trump going on this aggressive bender against Canada with like economic siege, with annexationist threats, it got so extreme that we had a huge sector of the Canadian public saying, wait a second, what do you mean we're going to be spending billions of dollars on this US fighter jet that will be 100% reliant on the US to be able to run?
2 minutes.
And people have talked about a kill switch in various ways, but basically, Canada is now doing a formal review about whether it is going to buy the F-35. I mean, I think they're going to conclude that they should buy it, but the fact that they've been forced to reconsider this major purchase is a win. And I mean, we're fighting it on all fronts. The Toronto chapter of World Beyond War is protesting hard right now because they're going to fly the F-35 over our city as part of their air show in a few weeks. And the last thing we need flying over our city is the same planes that are bombing Gaza right now. It's despicable.
Well, I expect wonderful reports and photos and videos from protests of that air show from you, Rachel. I recommend that people go to talkworldradio.org and watch the episode with Josh Paul listing the laws that are blatantly being violated here. I mean, I have no sympathy for the idea that there's some proper way to drop 2,000-pound bombs on somebody, but even the people who work for the institutions that make that their practice and their living think that Israel's doing it wrong. Israel's doing it illegally, even for the people who think there's a good and proper way to make it happen. We've been speaking with Rachel Small. She is the Canada organizer for World Beyond War, doing wonderful work for peace across the nation to my north. And we hope you keep doing it. Rachel Small, thanks for coming on Talk World Radio.
Thank you.
This is Talk World Radio. I'm David Swanson. Take action at rootsaction.org. Help end war at worldbeyondwar.org. Read or listen to today's Peace Almanac entry at peacealmanac.org. All past shows can be heard at talkworldradio.org. Talk World Radio is produced in Charlottesville, Virginia, and syndicated by Pacifica Network. There is no way to peace. Peace is the way.